Hello viewers, you're welcome to the concluding part of the television documentary that we started on Shelter Afrique's 35th AGM and Symposium. It was held in collaboration with the Supervisory Ministry, the Federal Ministry of Power, Works and Housing. And it's obvious that Shelter Afrique has keyed into the policy direction of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration in relation to housing. And that direction is provision of mass housing for the generality of our people. It's obvious in the choice of the theme that was chosen for the event. And the theme says, Housing Africa's Low-Income Urban Population. I say that again. Housing Africa's Low-Income Urban Population. This session promises to be very, very interesting, interactive, and of course you would enjoy it. So sit back and see what we've got to offer you today.
At a world level, housing supply has failed to respond to the need of the urban poor, with the cost of new housing, including those built by government agencies, significantly in excess of what the segment of the population can afford. The consequence is the rapid growth of informal settlements, slums on the edge of Africa's major cities, with obvious consequences for economic development, health, safety, and security. It is estimated that 80 to 90% of Africa's population falls within this bracket, and hence are renters. Despite this large population of renters in urban areas, this option is largely informal and often totally ignored as part of strategy. There is therefore a need to include rental housing as an additional option for meeting housing need. As Africa's primary housing development finance institution, this challenge presents an opportunity for Shelter Afrique to lead a result-focused debate on how the housing market can be made to work for the more than 300 million Africans, including women and children, who, with incomes less than $1 a day, live in informal and often unsafe homes. Hence, the 35th AGM and Symposium in Abuja, Nigeria. As part of an integrated set of activities, it was a symposium with the following key objectives: explore and introduce the audience to current approaches and innovations in planning and designing affordable housing for urban low-income earners. Showcase a range of construction methodologies appropriate for implementing affordable housing for people on low income, and explore financing options and structures for low-income housing projects.
Let me again acknowledge the presence in our midst of my colleagues, ministers from many African states, from Kenya, from Togo, from Tanzania, from Ghana, from Zimbabwe, and from many other parts of Africa. And let me acknowledge developers. And we have spent a little time going around the exhibitions, and it is quite inspiring, the levels of entrepreneurship, of innovations that we have come across. So it sets very clearly the platform for discussing the subject of our symposium, which is how we can provide affordable housing for Africa's growing urban low-income population.
The event attracted renowned experts and panelists, which included Joe Muturi, National Leader, Mungano Wa Wanavijiji Coordinator, Slum Dwellers International, East and West Housing Conditions for the Urban Poor, the Reality We Face.
All of us have to appreciate that Africa is one of the most rapidly urbanizing continents, And for us, it's a good thing because initially the issue of urban was not given very much coverage. And we are very happy that nowadays, slowly by slowly, people are recognizing that urbanization is an issue. People are recognizing that people moving to the city centers, the economic migrants, they will continue. And with that comes the challenge of housing. It also brings other challenges because most of our cities, as you can see, just to give you an example, if you go to the city of Nairobi, that's my city, it's a city of a population of around 4 million people, and 60% of those people live in informal settlements. And the city of Nairobi, I don't think, was prepared by this urbanization. You'll find that the economic migrants will continue coming. You'll find that the resources of the city are continuing to be strained. The services, water, roads, infrastructure. So with that recognition, it's good that also to share that the current level of urbanization in Kenya also is going to continue by 40%, and it will rise by the year 2030. So again, I'll give you an example in the context of my city, Nairobi. You'll find that it's a city of over 4 million people, 60% living in informal settlements. But the problem is that the 60% of our informal settlements only occupy less than 2% of the entire land. So we are assuming these and 60% of the population are at that corner. So these are things that if you don't take note, and this is a challenge that is coming to all these other African cities. So Africa has joined China and India as the third region of the world to reach a population of, and it's expected to double these numbers by 2050. Another example is Kinshasa, which is rapidly rising. If you go to other good case examples, is Ghana, Senegal, and Uganda have managed to reduce the urban slums population to more than 20%. Now to our country, our host country, more than 75% of Nigerians lived in slums in 1990, but now that has dropped to 61.9%. So it shows that something is being done to address the issues. However, a number of people living in slum conditions have grown in many cases because of the population. As the population increases, Africa is not only confronted with the challenge of improving the lives of the slum dwellers, but also challenge of preventing the formation of new slums.
Panel Discussion 1. Designing and building low-cost housing. An exploration of techniques. Panelists. Professor Olumide Olusonya, Professor of Architecture, University of Lagos, Nigeria.
Succession of inventions that made large-scale production possible. This resulted in the creation of great wealth in the developed nations. A human being, though an individual, is designed by his creator to actualize his nature in relationship only in relationship with his neighbors, with his fellows. Hence, the physical environment must reconcile the needs for privacy as well as community, the need for autonomy as well as interdependence. And this will translate into the need for identity and levels of identification. The need for identity, that would be the individual or the family, that is my house. Levels of identification would be our street, our square, our neighborhood, our estate. The slide on the left shows an example of healthy sociology, that is inwards to the family and outwards to the society. The one on the left, on the right, is inwards to the family. And if you look at this kind of environment, that corridor is not a social space. Human beings are not designed to live like this. Now, the slide on top shows an example of a healthy sociology which promotes a sense of community, where a threat to one is a threat to all, and also promotes a sense of maintaining environment. The one down with the fences ringing each family promotes alienation and isolation, which is everybody for himself, God for us all.
Now, to equally take us on matter of, exploring techniques for low-cost housing or affordable housing, if you like, I will call Ms. Jumoke Adegunle, who is currently the head of affordable housing and building with Lafarge, and is a seasoned professional in this industry. Over to you.
Social and business, that's what's really in it. And to drive that, there's actually a team set up, a central team at the group level in Zurich that is only focused on affordable housing. And in markets where we are present on affordable housing, there are local teams that drive what we do. An example is Nigeria. So this is just a map to show you the 25 countries we have presence of affordable housing units today. You'll see majority are in South America, in Asia, as well as in Africa. We also have in some developed countries, which some people find it hard to believe, there's actually a need for affordable housing in countries like France, which you see on the map here. So overall, what we've done is we're present in 25 countries, and we've been able to impact 400,000 people, and mainly through partnerships we have with microfinance banks. So 15,000 loans have been given to the end of 2015. We've been able to be part of 15,000 housing loans, and we've been able to generate actually some business from this, which is about 15 million across these 25 countries we're present. So how do we do this? There are 4 quadrants where we work when it comes to affordable housing. One is housing microfinance. We have earth and cement solutions, which is what we've been invited to talk about here today. Distribution in small quantities, we'll go through that very quickly, and then the mass affordable housing. These are the 4 initiatives we have today in affordable housing. So overall, with what we've experienced in the group, with the demand, a company is being set up, which is in partnership with the UK Department for International Development, their CDC, which is their finance arm, to really focus on housing, especially earth and cement solution. And the idea is to automate the brick production process, which is the first part. The next part is to offer this solution not just for the walls, but for the flooring, the roofing, etc., so that overall the construction costs can come down. What we've seen is between the earth and cement solution and a plastered burnt brick wall, there's about 20% savings in cost per square meter. And if we were to have a total solution, so roofing, etc., it could be up to 25% savings in costs.
Siku Nkoma, Managing Director, EDH Malawi.
We were at 20,000 bricks a day, and of course the demand for bricks in our city is about 4.6 million bricks a day. We know we are not even scratching the demand, but we know that if we were to increase our shafts and grow that line of industry, we start making a difference not just to our projects, but how our city is going to grow, because it's a very young city, and hopefully we start impacting how it's done in other cities and across the country as well. So we started this 2 years ago, and I'm proud to say that it took a bit of time, but by August last year we're doing our test runs, and we've had the rainy seasons to learn what not to do, what not to be done, and I think we are now ready for the scale and the challenges that is expected of us, because we are not challenged by anyone, we just challenge ourselves because there's no one to challenge. So when we started, as I said, we started this work in 2013. Our first project was in Lilongwe. This is called Likuni Meadows. Our job was to create a community. We're not interested in building houses. Anyone can build a house. But truly speaking, to make a difference and to reach out to the communities and the numbers, if you're talking of millions, it has to be communities, because once you move on, the community remains. So we worked on the Likuni Meadows, and being a startup company, we didn't have the kind of background, the kind of support that the government can give you. So our biggest challenge then was, how then do you ensure that you have the designs and you have the quality, you have the quantity that makes sense? So we were very fortunate because our university had just started. You have a professor here of architecture. I think our first graduates, first architect degrees came 3 years ago. So we're very fortunate that our company was able to get, you can really laugh, that's our reality. So our first architects started 3 years ago, and we got 2 of the brilliant ones.
Panel discussion 2. Financing housing supply and demand for low-income earners. Panelists: Frank Daphnis, President and Chief Executive Officer, Development Innovations Group, Bethesda, Maryland, USA.
The need to reconcile 3 conflicting objectives. So it's an equation with 3 parameters that we're trying to solve. The first one is affordability. So it has to be affordable. Poor people have to be able to pay for it. The second parameter is that the housing finance for the poor has to be viable for the financial institutions. And oftentimes, affordability and viability tend to be in opposition. And the third parameter is that it has to have an element of resource mobilization for the expansion of the sector for the national economy. What does that mean? Affordable means that poor people have to be able to repay it. What does that mean? It means that, and I'll generalize, but it means that the monthly payment cannot be $2,000 a month, because if you have a monthly payment of $2,000 a month, it means that poor and low-income people will not be able to repay that financing instrument. It needs to be viable. What does that mean? It means that if you say that it's housing finance for the poor, and the interest rate then that is being charged is heavily subsidized and it's at 1 or 2%, that means that the financial institution that provides the service will not be viable without a subsidy. So that means that commercially it's not going to work. And the third element about resource mobilization means that there needs to be a means within the economy, within the society, within the country to finance the growth and the expansion of that housing finance for the poor. So those 3 parameters, sometimes you could solve one. You could solve affordability, but you solve affordability by subsidizing the interest rate. So you could solve for affordability, but you have a problem with the viability, the commercial viability. So the way he phrased it is that once we've solved all 3, we are on a pathway to being able to deliver housing finance for the poor.
Olivia Caldwell, Affordable Housing Institute, Boston, Massachusetts.
We're moving now across the demand side of the value chain. And I'm basically walking you across it, where you go from eligibility to application, to maybe a subsidy, credit underwriting, loan closing, funding, loan servicing, and enforcement. And on the supply side, you go from land to infrastructure, site layout, design, construction, offtake, which is important, and management. And there are so many links in this value chain on both sides, with so many actors. And at every point, there's a transition. Something happens. And at the very end, the 2 meet, where the management of the site, or basically it means that offtake and loan servicing, where someone gets a loan, whether it's housing microfinance or a mortgage, in order to move into a house. But in order for that to happen, a lot of steps need to happen beforehand.
Mr. James Mugenwa, Managing Director of Shelter Afrique, said the prevalent need for affordable and quality housing in the continent required a strong commitment from governments. Making the difference, launch of Shelter Afrique agenda for low-income housing and an international competition to promote 10,000 demonstration low-income housing units in 36 months. The Managing Director appealed to governments and all concerned agencies to lift the restrictions to land registration and perfection of titles to ease housing development. In furtherance of its resolve to provide decent residential accommodation to the continent in general, particularly the Nigerian worker in public and private sectors. Nearly all the participants were full of praises for the organizers and the hosting government of Federal Republic of Nigeria.
I have with me the gentleman that you will call the brain behind the successful outing. He is in person of, or should I say his official designation is the Managing Director, Shelter Afrique. And simply we call him James Mogerawa. James, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
My very first question, the minister, when he was talking, did say that the map, the roadmap to solving Nigeria's housing problem is on proper planning, standardization, and implementation. What's your take?
I think the minister was spot on. These issues that keep on coming regarding affordability and the number of housing units in Africa, the challenge to face, to handle the deficit that we have in all these African countries, actually ultimately boiled down to what the minister said. I think we have a number of issues about financing, about the construction, the land, the titling, but ultimately, if we do not plan ahead, we always end up in projects that overrun in terms of costs, that have poor delivery quality, and then ultimately that does not contribute to what we want to really achieve. I think he's right. We need to first and foremost really slow down, understand what the challenges are. A great number of our developers across Africa don't have the right expertise in terms of planning, in terms of sourcing, in terms of procuring, in terms of getting the right financial products. So ultimately, they inevitably run into all kinds of issues and challenges when they're delivering these housing units.
As Managing Director of the Value Chain Project Consultancy, can you tell us what sort of value do you think you can add to all that has happened here today in the provision of housing for our low-income earners?
Yeah, like the question I posed to some of the participants when they were speaking, there's a strong need to change the paradigm from just looking at the housing perspective and the finance to the off-taker. So there's something we've designed called the Affordable Demand Diagnostic Survey. And we are currently Affordable Demand Diagnostic Survey. Maybe because of my medical background, you know. We look at diagnosis before you recommend treatment.
Yeah,
I found out that in housing solutions in Africa, they talk about solutions all the time, and the diagnosis of the problem is not properly articulated. It's not data-based, it's not generic, it's not empirical. So in Value Chain Project Consultants Limited, I used my experience as a developer before to now design a strategy where we check out the affordable demand, how capable a person is to be able to afford a home. Then we structure a customized design for his housing, and then we can then design financial products.
How would you say your outfit is ready to key into partnering with the Nigerian people and government?
Well, let me tell you, it was very exciting because lots of excellent ideas, lots of opportunities, people from the real estate sector, people from the financing sector, people from the construction industry. So it was an extremely dynamic presentation today. And look, we are prepared to work. We work more on the finance side of things. So transfer of knowledge in terms of housing microfinance. We are talking to Shelter Afrique. We are talking to others. So what I can tell you is that we will be working in Nigeria. We will be working in other countries in the region, and I very, 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 very much look forward to it.
As the UN Habitat Report recommended, government should thus modify the regulatory framework, develop credit programs and other forms of assistance to support housing production with a view to creating more mental housing and improve existing stock. In other words, public officials should change their attitude towards current housing policies and do something practical. The private sector should also support this effort.
Well, viewers, this is where we call it a day on your program Towards a Greater Nigeria. In the words of the Honorable Minister, Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, he did reiterate one singular point, which is very, very germane, that for us to be able to get it right, we must ensure, in relation to housing, we plan and plan and plan. he did emphasize proper planning. And you'll recall the adage that says, those that fail to plan, they plan to fail. In Nigeria, we must realize that this is very, very important because we don't plan to fail. So we must plan. And this is where we call it a day. Looking at all that had happened at the 35th AGM of the Shelter Afrique in collaboration with the ministry, we could see that they have keyed in to the agenda of President Muhammadu Buhari in relation to housing, which is provision of housing for all. They call it mass housing. In any case, next week promises to be yet another exciting and instructive edition. Don't forget to join me then. Thank you for watching. Do have a beautiful evening. Good evening.